During my school days in India, I was known as a bit of a geek. With my parents having transferable jobs, I ended up changing schools frequently. Since private schools didn't admit new students during midterm, I qualified for entrance to a central school. I studied there until grade 8 and then made the decision to attend a prestigious boarding school, which was considered one of the top 5 schools in India at the time. The story I want to share begins after I cleared the written test for the boarding school in the morning. I was scheduled to have an interview in the evening. That's when I happened to meet another family from my hometown. Their daughter, whom I'll refer to as Laura, turned out to be the main antagonist of my story. Laura behaved like a know-it, all brat, and unfortunately, my family had a habit of comparing me to other kids. Coupled with the pressure of the upcoming interview, this situation drove me a bit crazy. Laura went in for her interview before me and came out upset, claiming she had only answered 9 out of 10 questions correctly. I, on the other hand, had answered 5 questions and still got selected. The interview was more of a personality assessment, while knowledge was tested in the written part. However, my family couldn't resist making comments about how my selection was just luck or how I wouldn't survive in a school full of girls like Laura. These comments continued until the school term started and I moved into the hostel. Coming from a background of attending mediocre government schools, I faced challenges in the boarding school, especially with the strict English-speaking environment. My spoken English skills were disastrous, and I even recall a moment when my teacher asked me why I hadn't done my homework, and I replied, "Ma'am, I was absent tomorrow." Additionally, being away from home for the first time made me homesick quite frequently. On top of all that, the stress of weekly tests and the less-than-appetizing hostel food compared to home-cooked meals made my experience feel like hell. Within just 3 months, people's perception of me was that I was dumb, shy, and lacking common sense. Only my hostel mates knew my true nature. To add to my stress, Laura found it amusing to gang up on me and bully me. It was quite surprising, but it actually happened. Whenever I was alone, she would mock me, calling me ugly, fat, and dumb. Knowing the consequences, if I lost my temper, I chose to remain silent. However, she escalated her bullying by using foul language and indecent words, all in English. Initially, I wasn't bothered by it since I had heard worse from my friends at my previous school. I was merely curious as to why she was targeting me. As it turned out, she was angry with me for not helping her cheat in the written exam, which could have jeopardized her chances of getting into the school. Now that she had made it in and I was labeled as the dumb one, she felt she could have her way with me. I endured her torment throughout grade 9, but eventually I began to crack. However, fate seemed to be against me when she became the girlfriend of my best friend and roommate, whom I'll refer to as Ed. Being loyal to the bro code, I had to abandon any plans for revenge and honor the bond between friends. Laura started spreading rumors among the other girls, claiming that I had been expelled from my previous school for failing, even though I had scored 93 in the previous grade, that my father had bribed the school to get me admitted, when in reality he had taken out a loan to pay my term fees, that I smoked, which I had never done in my life, not even now, and that I used to beat up kids who messed with me, the only accusation that held some truth. These claims transformed her into a figure resembling Joan of Arc, a courageous lady challenging a supposed demon like me. I endured her insults for another year until grade 10 when we had our board exams, the most important exams for Indian students. It was during this time that Laura broke up with Ed, citing his lack of attention as the reason. Ironically, he ended up scoring 98.4 in the exams with perfect 100s in 3 out of 5 subjects. Losing her as an ally was a slight relief for me. Soon after, she started dating a classmate of mine, Rob. It was around this time that I discovered Facebook, a new trend back then. Rob belonged to a group of troublemakers in the school, which intoxicated Laura with a sense of power. She began commenting with insults on every photo I posted on Facebook, and Rob would like her comments. Wanting to retaliate, I left a passive-aggressive comment on one of her pictures, although I later realized that I could have simply blocked her. In response, she and Rob threatened me while I was having a snack. Luckily, I was surrounded by my hostel mates and they backed off. Later on, they even stole one of my assignments, a childish act, but since I rarely did them anyway, it didn't bother me much. As I reflect on these events while writing them down, it amazes me how long I managed to restrain myself. However, there came a point where enough was enough, and I was determined not to hold back any longer. You see, I had never been popular among the girls at school, but I befriended a new girl named Laura. Laura began bad, mouthing me in front of her, and that's when I finally snapped. I wanted to exact revenge on a higher level. First, I gathered information from Ed, and later from Rob after their recent breakup. Now, let me summarize the climax of my story. In my final year during the school's annual day function, we usually had VIPs as guests. This time, the chief guest was the governor of the state. Coincidentally, it was also Laura's 18th birthday. Here's what I did to prepare. I bought a mosquito coil, saved a large firecracker from Diwali, and spent nearly Rst. 1,000 on a 50-day pack of marijuana, commonly known as raw mango in my area. I spied on Laura until I discovered that she planned to engage in some illegal activity with her friends in the girls' room during the annual day, knowing that everyone would be occupied with the functions. I experimented with the burn time of the mosquito coil and found that 3 inches of coil burned for half an hour. Finally, on the day of the annual function, I gave the marijuana pack to Ed and set up a 12-inch coil with the firecracker inside the girls' room, 2 hours before their meeting. Ed discreetly placed the marijuana pack in Laura's school bag as she left the classroom for the auditorium. As the governor delivered his speech, a sudden blast echoed through the school. Prefects rushed to the source of the sound and discovered Laura in the girls' room, but she hadn't started whatever illegal activity she had planned. The prefects insisted on checking her school bag, and she agreed, seemingly confident. Even the governor's guards came to investigate, along with the principal and teachers who were eager to appear active. In front of everyone, a senior student in the 12th grade was caught with the illegal raw mango in her possession. This was not a case the school could hide or brush under the rug. Consequently, Laura was arrested. It didn't matter that she had scored 92.4 in the board exams, or that she was expected to secure an all-India rank of 15 in mock engineering entrance tests. Her achievements paled in comparison to the embarrassment of being caught red-handed with illegal substances. That incident occurred 9 years ago. I went on to attend a good engineering college and landed a great job. I never heard about Laura again. All I know is that the expression on her face when the prefects discovered the marijuana in her bag was absolutely priceless. Years ago, I worked at a logistics facility where middle management often faced an increasing workload. It was rare for them to last more than 3 years before becoming disillusioned or finding new jobs. I started as a regular worker on the floor and eventually worked my way up to becoming a team leader after 2 years. After another 3 years, I became a shift leader, responsible for managing a team of around 60 workers. Our shift performed exceptionally well, surpassing the key performance indicators, key KPIs, of other shifts in our facility and elsewhere. We achieved this by engaging in cross-training and quickly adapting to the ever-changing demands of the company, current orders, and work processes. Everything was going smoothly until a new manager, who had a tendency to micromanage, joined the team. It didn't take long for him to request that I write a detailed log of how I spent my days. Although I warned him against this approach, I agreed to comply with his request. During the first week, I diligently recorded my activities every 30 minutes with brief descriptions, thinking it was already a waste of time. To my surprise, he criticized me for not providing enough detail and demanded an account of every 15 minutes. Once again, I expressed my concerns, but he insisted on his approach. In response, I began writing 4 or 5 lines for every 15-minute interval, even if the task took longer. For example, I would document which workers took their lunch breaks early or late. I repeated the same lines if a task extended beyond 15 minutes. Gradually, my logs evolved to include additional elements. To his credit, he actually followed up on a few things during the first 3 weeks. If he had continued doing so, I wouldn't have minded as much. However, he quickly gave up, and I realized he had stopped reading my logs when I referenced one of the follow-ups without receiving any response from him. From then on, I suspected he no longer bothered to read them. This led to an act of malicious compliance on my part. After a few weeks of writing logs that went unread, I started adding small tidbits of my own creation. Initially, I included lines stating that if he used a specific phrase when talking to me the following week, I would buy him a soda. Of course, he never used any of the phrases, so he missed out on the free drinks. The phrases were something like pineapples are best served hot or apples are sweeter than oranges. These were general statements, unlikely to come up randomly in conversation. Despite my boss claiming to read every single report, he ridiculed my objections and asserted that my logs were a valuable idea. As the weeks went by without any acknowledgement or response, my acts of malicious compliance grew more significant. I eventually promised him $100 in cash if he would discuss a specific picking location in our facility during the following week. Of course, he never did. However, alongside these humorous additions, I continued to include relevant information in the logs. I asked him questions about potential problems and suggested he start planning vacations well in advance of holidays. Still, I received no acknowledgement whatsoever. If he truly read the logs, why didn't he utilize them to address questions or potential issues? After a year of writing logs that remained unopened and untouched in the assigned folder, our great leader found himself in trouble and attempted to shift the blame onto his subordinates. This did not sit well with us, especially since the logs clearly documented the cause of the trouble from the very beginning. The problem persisted and grew, costing us valuable time and money each week. Consequently, a meeting was convened with all the foremen, team leads, shift leads, and middle managers, with several high-ranking executives observing as our boss tried to rectify the situation. Whenever he targeted one of my people, I stood up for them and took responsibility for the entire shift. There was no need for him to single out my team members because I was present and the responsibility fell on me. I could see a gleam in his eye, indicating that he was about to make me the scapegoat. I calmly sat there as he unleashed his anger upon me, holding nothing back. The intensity of his tirade made even some of the higher-ups uncomfortable as they could sense he was overplaying his hand. When he finally finished, I asked him if he was done and requested permission to respond. He agreed, leaning back in his chair, confident in his character assassination. I took out my laptop and connected it to the big screen so that everyone could see. I opened the folder where my logs were stored and pointed out that they hadn't been accessed for a while. Furthermore, I activated the track changes feature, which clearly showed that only my user had made edits and saved the logs. I then proceeded to describe the log entries where the problem was first discovered, how it progressed, and how it eventually became a major issue. One of the most satisfying moments came when I demonstrated that we had suggested numerous solutions in the logs, all of which had been ignored. I highlighted the multiple meetings we had held to discuss the problem, its causes and possible solutions, even directly asking my manager for input. The logs showed that we had alerted him to the problem many times in various ways, but there were no records of any solutions or responses from him. I was so focused on the presentation that I didn't pay much attention to my boss's reaction. However, when I finished, I glanced up at him and witnessed a level of anger I had never seen before. He was seething with fury, but he couldn't do much with his boss and his boss's boss present. His boss asked him if he had anything to say for himself, but he remained mostly silent. He tried to claim that I had edited the logs later and added details that were not known at the time of writing, but it was clear that he was grasping at straws to save himself. One of the high-ranking executives in the room brought up a phrase he had noticed in the logs, asking, "What's so special about a ticking location?" I gladly explained the inside joke and how my boss had missed out on receiving numerous free sodas and potentially $400 if he had simply said the magic words each week. Laughter filled the room, and I was instructed to leave the meeting along with everyone at my pay grade or below. 3 hours later, a security officer emptied my boss's office of his personal belongings as he was fired. 2 weeks later, a new boss arrived from another facility. This new manager and I had an excellent working relationship. He trusted me and my shift, allowing us to operate independently. As a result, we consistently exceeded our key Ps for the remainder of my time at the company.